Hi, welcome. My name's Dale McCluskey. On this video, as part of my series called Flipping the Script, going to be responding by way again of trainers who set in motion a deceptive picture of change. Again, I talk about what training represents once a relationship problem is already underway. Talk about when training, you're going to hear here when trainers talk about behavior. Okay, I talk about the proper context of behavioral issues in terms of once a dog starts to gain control in the relationship, how control will manifest itself. Okay, be expressed in various ways is where you will encounter all sorts of problems in the relationship with your dog. And again, that's why I talk about when I talk about the parenting example. Okay, when I talk about the parenting example, I would really encourage people to consider, okay, in terms of your role, in terms of a child, a selfish child. As a child becomes more and more selfish, behavioral problems increase. Okay, right to a point of bullying, of being with a really bad attitude, and again, it's no different in a lot of ways in terms of the social, okay, aspect of what's happening in terms of relationship, in terms of the social connection part of that, in terms of your role. And when you look at dogs as social animals, and you start to tie this all together, you'll start to understand why it is that you're going to hear it here, how the majority of trainers are jumping into a relationship problem without any sort of consideration, okay, as to what they're setting in motion, okay, in terms of just getting dogs to respond in a superficial way. Why that would be very deceptive, why you shouldn't, and you can't trust those responses that way. Dogs are moving around for treats, they're moving around for something that they want, that oftentimes those responses are just responses. Okay, they're just the dog doing a sit, and you're assuming, well, wow, there's a sit happening, there's a down happening, that looks great, but the problem is oftentimes it's not great at all. It doesn't mean anything. Okay, you're just buying into a bad picture of change. What I show people is that what training is, it's not a learning based exercise that way. It's not about using treats or using motivating the dog to respond. It's about it takes a path of a intervention. And again, when you consider the problems with the responses, I would encourage you to think about it's no different. It'd be like you as a parent in the middle of a relationship problem with a already selfish child, okay, and you want the selfish child to say pick up their toys, clean up their room, or do something that is a good response, right? Something as a parent to say, hey, I want my child to pick up, say, their toys, and you incentivize those responses, okay, by way of, well, you pick up your toys, here's a brand new Xbox game, or here's $100. They can be highly motivated, okay, highly motivated to perform a certain task, a certain response. But here's the rub, okay, here's the problem, and this is something you need to keep in your back pocket, okay, when you see responses a certain way and you're assuming that those responses look fantastic and you just want to buy into the picture. Is that considered what I just said about the selfish child example? Yeah, the child could pick up their toys, but you have to ask yourself a question: is that all it's about in terms of your role, in terms of dealing with a ongoing relationship problem? The child's selfish. Is that your complete kind of assessment or how you're going to look at change itself? It's based on those superficial responses. So when people talk about, well, bribery, like when does bribery become bribery? Well, bribery becomes bribery when you ignore your role. Okay, when I talk about influence, it's just like parental influence through the relationship and through your role. When you ignore that, in terms of change itself, more needs to be happening. Okay, in terms of you as a parent, in terms of how you're engaging the relationship that way. And so, in terms of, because here's the thing, I talk about, what's revealed, and really think about what I'm saying. Ask yourself the question, if you would change this up with the example, say, as a parent, like clean up your room, you say, clean up your room. Okay. It's a demand now, right? It's not meant to be unreasonable, but you're like, clean up your room because you're the parent. Okay. Versus here's $100. Think of the difference in that. Okay, now parental influence, okay, your role is being defined in that moment that way by taking the path of a demand. Think about what's revealed through say the bad attitude of a child. Okay. Is that like real? Like, no, I'm not picking up my toys. Like, where's my $100? Right? Think about that. Because that's what's happening in the dog training world. Understand this whole thing about people understanding what's this whole picture change. And the thing about responses is that it's defined through what's revealed through once parental influence, just like the example the parent is part of the equation. Okay, how that changes, right? Everything, how that changes what's revealed or not revealed. But see, that's the point. The point is, it's about the man. Because here's the thing: is if the child isn't selfish, then incentivizing may not be a problem at all. Like that's not. But here's the thing with the dog training world is they don't package up, they don't even address, or they don't even look at the fact that when I talk about a relationship problem, they don't even define training that way. They don't look at dogs that way. They don't connect the dog even in terms of behavioral issues, the way I talk about in terms of, as a child becomes more and more selfish. Well, look at dogs as they gain more and more control, right? We're at the point of aggression. Well, that's indicative of, that represents that you're dealing with a relationship problem. You see, that's really it from the beginning. Is right from the beginning, okay? And you see here with this trainer, ask the question, okay, what is he doing? Okay, what are these trainers doing? Are they considering anything I'm saying? And so when you end up with a bad picture at the end of a process, don't be surprised. I mean, the thing is, in the dog training world, so much, and this is really part of the package deal. So many dog owners are ending up with a bad picture of change. With this is a cautionary tale. Dogs are looking great, and then it's like then next thing you know, someone gets bit, or you're still dealing with problems that aren't going away, and they want to blame the dog. Well, there's something. No, it's everything wrong with the process. Everything wrong with these trainers who absolutely refuse, okay, to change their ways, to actually step back and ask the questions they need to ask. So this is inherent to the dog training community. So let's play this, because here you start out. It says charging the marker. Okay, so understand right from the get-go, right? This is setting up this whole thing about what I talked about, okay, and understand this is hardwired into these trainers. Like, how can I get this dog to respond so I can, right? So that's the wrong way to be thinking. Okay, that's the wrong way to be thinking. It should be taking a path of a intervention. Okay, say intervention type of conversation. You look at my, encourage to watch my videos, how I'm doing this, but it's about stepping in and bringing those at the social level, bringing those core ingredients online, influence and control in a way which the dog understands intent. Okay, it makes sense to the dog, but it's going to bring out the problem. Okay, it's going to address the issue, and it's going to change perception of dogs the right way. It's not about being over the top or abusive or mean. A lot of people want to try to sell that, because understand what they're doing here, because they're following the themes of bribery, right? Accommodation that goes, because those themes set up a bad picture, and it looks really, really great from the surface. What they're trying to tell you is, oh, if Dale's doing it this way, and look at these reactions going on, that means it's abuse, right? But think about the parenting example. Okay, same thing with a parent who's engaging the selfish child, like pick up your toys because you're the parent, and you're getting some pushback, you're getting some attitude back. They want you to believe the same thing. Is like that attitude means that there's abuse happening, right? That type of pushback, and the pushback is going to be, it's going to be more with, if the more selfish that child is. I mean, that pushback is going to be there. Now, it doesn't mean that you enjoy that or you want that to happen, but that's the reality, okay? Through the authoritative parenting style, not the permissive, authoritative. That's where change happens. But, it's about doing things smart too at the same time. So if you watch my videos, you'll see how I'm engaging. It's not meant to elicit high challenge, but you're going to see moments of challenge. Okay, but there's a conversation happening. The dog understands intent. Okay, I'm not doing it because I hate dogs. I'm doing it because I understand the issues here. But I understand the whole dog training world. The majority of these trainers, they want to they're selling, understand their marketing, right? So it's not in their best interest to go there, right? Because, you know, the dog training community, understand this is so pervasive and so massive a problem that you're selling it this way, that it seems normal to blame dogs. It seems normal. Like a lot of dog owners end up with a bad picture of change, and they want to normalize it. Well, I'm showing it's not normal. So right here, so he's talking about charging the marker.
Charging the marker. We want to make sure that we only reward our dog for behavior that we like.
So right here is a problem. Okay, this is inherent to the majority of trainers out there. They talk about behavior that they like. Well, what's a behavior? How are they packaging this up? I asked myself the question: how they aligning that word in terms of this picture? Okay, they're using the word behavior to, align with response. Okay, the dog's behavior we want response. But understand where I'm coming from here. It'd be like me with this going back to the selfish child example. The behavior that we want, right? With bribing the child that's already selfish child to pick up their toys and saying, "Oh, the behaviors well doesn't fit." Okay, it's like no, you're just bribing and you're getting some responses going on, but those but the word how it's used in the dog training world that they used it to gin up okay these superficial responses. They use it to try to suggest that more's going on here, that you can trust these responses. Like they bring these words in and they don't belong. Okay, this is a superficial picture that you're seeing. This is just a response. Big deal. And I say that like what is it? Is this a response? But the question you have to ask: can you trust the response is based on the information I'm putting out? No. Okay, that's the bottom line.
So if your dog is jumping on you, or if
So see, you'll have dogs again when you see all the invading your space. Okay, pay attention when you have dogs that have gained a level of control. They'll come in, invade your space, be jumping on you, and typically the dog owner will be standing back just watching it. All right. So when I'm advocating, say, hey, you need to right bring your dog under a level of control, right, and then start to change the dog's focus, right, so that the dog isn't going to be doing that and expressing that way. Right here, it's about using a treat, trying to reward a certain response, right? But trying to work off a baseline here. That's what these trainers try to do. Say, well, if the dog goes into a sit for a treat, that automatically means that the problem's being resolved. Not necessarily whatsoever. Okay, the dog's saying, yeah, I'll sit for a treat, but I still own you. Okay, I'm still in control. See, this whole thing about this exchange happening here with treats, but it's about understand it's about your role being defined properly, not through those core ingredients I talk about, the social law, influence and control. So therefore it's got to be reconciled through how you're interacting. Okay, it's got to be interaction based, right? It's got to take that path. Here it's an exchange of okay, you get a treat, you do a sit or a down. Oh, look, that's great. The jumping has stopped. Like, has it really? Okay, in that moment it has, because the same illustration I make when people will talk about some balance trainers that they talk about rewarding bad behavior to create good behavior. It's like what's that? But think of it this way again, going back to the selfish child example, it'd be like a selfish child mouthing off at the parent, right? Mouthing off, not doing certain things, mouthing off, and then you suddenly pull out a chocolate bar and you hold it to the side, right? And the child is like immediately just instead of mouthing off, they're like focused on the chocolate bar. And you're in because understand these are this is part of the dog training world. This is what they're trying to tell you is that value of that treat, and the focus shifts that way that you can trust that change of focus is meaning that something's good's happening. But with the chocolate bar and the selfish child, to ask yourself the question, well, now the selfish child, you pull because you just pulled it out of nowhere and put it to the side, and the child stopped mouthing off at you, and then you give them the chocolate bar. But in that moment, does that represent that the attitude of the child is getting better? Okay. I mean, yeah, sure, you may have got out of a situation, or you may have changed the focus of the child in that moment. But does that mean that that moment can be is the framework to move forward, or that moment represents that good things are happening? See, that's the deception here. Understand, I talk about the context of focus. Using certain things to change focus, using certain things to gain a response absent right your role defined the way I talk about with those core ingredients happening through a interaction based approach, right, to truly change, to offer up a real picture of change. See, that's the difference here. Understand the dog training world is the majority of trainers out there are doing it this way. Okay, and they use that word behavior. Doesn't belong. Okay.
or if you're scratching your legs, we don't want to reward that behavior. So first, you say good boy. First, you say good boy. And then we want to add meaning to that word by giving them food or a treat.
Say give him food or a treat. So this is where you talk about charge it and say the clicker. This is clicker training, but it doesn't have to be a clicker. It's creating association to the dog responding. So if the dog does A, say it does a sit, the dog gets a treat. You can line it up with a verbal, a word. But the words themselves may be, totally absent of being seen the right way. Okay, understand, with dogs, and this is what makes dogs, like, to me, amazing animals. Okay, they really do expose this faulty counterfeit picture. Understand, dogs are about connection. Okay, they're all about relationship. It's about how they see you the right way through that relationship. So again, when you're creating this type of scenario where you're trying to set in motion, because this is what this trainer is trying to do. Other trainers, they all do the same thing. They're trying to set in motion at the beginning in the middle of a relationship problem. See, that's the thing they don't want to talk about. The package is up properly to begin with. This is your problem. Understand, this is where it all begins. This is where the problems begin because they're hardwired this way. It's like they walk into a home environment and the only thought process is in their head is right away. It's like, how can I get this dog to respond so I can just package it up, that picture up? It's a bad picture, okay, and sell it and say you're good to go. And you're not good to go. Okay. They haven't dialed you into your role properly. They haven't brought those core ingredients into the mix in terms of a process. And so it's a counterfeit picture. Oftentimes it's happening. It'll look great and it'll make you feel really good, especially if your emotions are connected into the relationship at a certain level, and people will buy into it, and people do. And all the blame shifting on the dogs, and people will accept less than what they could get out of the relationship. Understand, this is the problem here, is that people are accepting less than what they can get. They're not taking the stress off their dog, because if your dog's left holding this role and control, the dog is going to be very stressed out, reactive. You're going to be stressed out. Okay, you're not going to truly be happy. You're going to be walking on eggshells all the time. You're going to be, and then you're going to be keep buying into this stuff. So I'll stop it here because I talk about where it all begins. It all begins with the type of picture that's being set in motion. So my encouragement is to avoid, okay, this type of a way to engage a relationship problem. You don't want to be using treats. Balanced trainers they're the same, okay, as force free, basically, because they all work off of this idea about training as a learning based exercise. They all set this picture in motion this way for the majority. So they all engage in blame shifting when the picture is a bad picture. So check out my website. Lots of great information. I talk about what is training, how to have the right conversation through a intentional interaction based approach. If you have questions, contact me. I'll be more than happy to help you and your dog. Thanks for watching.